Today, we turn our attention to one of the world's most devastating yet overlooked crises, the war in Sudan. The war has displaced millions, families have been torn apart, and cities reduced to rubble. To help us understand the human side of this crisis, I'm joined by Dr. Serhat Orakçı. Together, we will explore what's really happening on the ground, the struggles of civilians, and what the world can do to help. Dr. Serhat Orakçı lectures at Haliç University in International Relations and Political Sciences. He knows Sudan and the Horn region as a whole because he has worked in Sudan as IHH, the Humanitarian Relief Foundation of Turkey, on its project as a project and Africa coordinator. He has authored a book on the Turkish-African relations in addition to his PhD thesis on the issue of Sudan. He's an expert on the subject, and his perspective would be one that would give us a lot of insight into the humanitarian problem in Sudan currently unfolding between our eyes. And I would like to welcome Dr. Serhat. Thank you for coming to the podcast. My first question would be why is it really important to stress the humanitarian aspect of the conflicts? Usually, the coverage is about the politics, the power struggle, and the things between these things. But at the same time, I believe it's very important to look at the humanitarian side. But why do you think is it really very important for us to discuss these matters from a humanitarian perspective?
Yeah, the humanitarian situation in Sudan or in any other place is matters because we are human. So we have some feelings. So when we see some disasters or man-made conflicts or other issues, when there is a humanitarian crisis, of course, when we see them with our eyes, this affects us as a human. So we, of course, show some interest. In Sudan, unfortunately, there is a horrific scene we see actually, especially after the Al Fashir fall down to the RSF power. So, and in this scene, we see some horrific screams, some killings, mass violations of the human rights. So these are not acceptable, of course, from our side or from the side of the international human laws. So I'm actually observing the humanitarian situation in Sudan since this clash or conflict started between the Sudanese armed forces and the rapid support forces in 2023 in April. And the situation, unfortunately, is not developing, it is going worse. So we see a worsening humanitarian situation right now in Sudan. Millions of people displaced. This is a fact, actually. And there are mass killings in many regions, and we don't know how many people died already. So this is very problematic, actually, because there is no source right now which show us the exact number of the dead people in Sudan. And later we see a lot of food crisis in many places, including the capital city of Khartoum, and especially in Darfur region. Uh, in some areas, unfortunately, the humanitarian support is not entering. It is blocked by the clashing powers. So, under these conditions, we see a terrible humanitarian situation, and the related agencies like the United Nations and other humanitarian organizations already confirmed this terrible situation in Sudan. And the other thing, unfortunately, it is not an easy to reach Sudan to support Sudanese people with the humanitarian aid. This is also another issue, and because there is no safe humanitarian corridor to the areas affected by the clashes, affected by the violence. So, under these circumstances, unfortunately, I'm very disappointed. We cannot reach Sudan on time, and we cannot reach Sudanese people to help them in
Yes.
their this difficulty.
Yes, so the humanitarian cases, all the time when there is a war, you see civilians dying, you see people dying, you see women being raped, children being killed, attacked indiscriminately, and all these things actually form a humanitarian crisis. But it is seldom, it's mostly ignored by international media whenever some geopolitical advantage or disadvantages weighed against it. Sometimes it gets hidden when it's the interest of the media, the international media. Sometimes it's open to the public. But seeing this, such type of gruesome acts being perpetrated, even though the blockade later on, now we don't have a clear picture of what's going on, because one bad side of this blockade is when people commit heinous crimes, then they try to hide them as much as they can to avoid international outcry against those crimes. And have we seen the same thing happening in Sudan, where the media does not have access to what is really going on, except to the first few days of the capture of Al Fashir, as we've seen in Sudan?
Yeah, the pictures actually came from Fasher is very disappointing, horrific. But this is not new issue. Since this crisis started in Sudan 2.5 years ago, we saw a lot of time similar atrocities, especially in Darfur region. I remember, for example, in Al Janina city, uh, mass killings happened a time a certain time ago, and thousands of people in one day. The rapid support forces killed and buried in the soil. So, uh, and when we look at the history of Darfur, actually, this type of humanitarian violations are very often taking place in that geography because, as you know, in Sudan, there is a cries over cries. So Sudanese people are witnessing a crisis without actually finalizing a crisis because in 2003 there was a crisis in Darfur region, as you know, and later on in 2019 there was a regime change in Sudan and there is a transition, and in this transition actually things didn't go well because uh, the rapid support forces and the Sudanese armed forces, they started clashing each other for the power, for controlling the country. So uh, the, the point right now we arrived is not unfortunately, is not a good place for Sudan or Sudanese. We are living in the 21st century, unfortunately, but we see horrific scenes in televisions, in the social media, and in the other tools. So this is unacceptable, actually, and this is. I think Sudan deserves better than this.
Yeah. So,
This is
in your
unacceptable.
opinion, sir, yes, in your opinion, is it comparable to other places? Can we call it a genocide? Is it better? Is it worse? And what are the numbers of deaths? What type of numbers are we looking at in terms of the displacement, the hunger, the suffering? Are we dealing with tens of thousands of people? The number of the displacement in millions? How do you see it in comparison to other conflict areas in the
You see,
world?
the United Nations actually defined the Sudan as the largest displacement crisis in the earth right now because approximately 15 million people displaced since the war outbroke in Sudan. 15 million people. And around 4 million people of this 15 million, they immigrated to neighboring countries, including Egypt, Chad, Ethiopia. Even when I visited Uganda, for example, last year, I saw refugees came from Sudan. So in the region of East Africa, right now, in any country, you can find Sudanese refugees. This is a big displacement actually, and internally when we look right now, more than 10 million people became IDPs, and they live in a terrible conditions without food, without water, without sanitation, and without adequate health care. So healthcare, for example, is a very important matter, is a very important issue, but unfortunately, the conflict affected hospitals in Sudan. Right now, I don't know, is there any working hospital? Maybe you can find in Khartoum or in big cities, but especially in the rural areas, especially in the areas affected by the conflicts, the hospitals are not working. Health staff, they actually work under a huge risk, uh, and this also affect their working conditions. Education,
Yes.
education.
Can we see intent when it? Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay, we'll come back to the education one. Do we see intent in deliberate disruption of civilian life? It looks like some of the videos, the killings, the summary executions, they look very deliberate, and they somehow show the intent of destruction of one race for political gain. It doesn't that make it a genocide by itself?
Yeah, the scenes actually similar to genocide, and especially the scenes came from the El Fashir. Looks like a genocide because there is a mass killing. And I don't think it is turned to a one race, specific race. Actually,
Mm.
it is a collective punishment, I think. And this is deliberate. RSF is right now using violence as a deliberately, as a strategy to give collective punishment to the people resisting their armies or their militias. So this is a deliberate strategy. I think this is not an this is thought and planned and strategically implanted violence, and sounds like a genocide. Really, right now, unfortunately, there is no investigation, of course, either by the International Criminal Court or by the local courts. Unfortunately, there is no going on investigation, but later probably there will be some investigations after all this happened, after all this ended, and probably they will conclude that as a genocide.
Yeah, it's very confusing when politicians actually find sleep amid such horror when civilians are deliberately being attacked and killed in droves, and politicians just do not
You see,
seem
the
to care
politics.
about the
You see,
people
the
that are dying.
politics is a yeah, politics is a dirty game. So politicians usually they look at the conclusion. So during all this way, there will be some sufferings, and usually the ordinary people they pay the price. We know that from all the conflicts. Ordinary people, ordinary citizens, they pay the bill, they pay the price, and the politicians they care much controlling, ruling, controlling the sources, etc. So this is the nature of the politics, unfortunately.
Yes, unfortunate conflict has descended over Sudan. News came out yesterday that the RSF has accepted a temporary ceasefire, a humanitarian ceasefire, as it was a recommendation from the UAE, the United States, the UK, and also Saudi Arabia. So they said they're going to stop the attack for a while. Do you think such type of ceasefire would work? Can it become permanent, or is it something that could work for the region and stop the killing of civilians as we see it now?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so because right now RSF is trying to correct its image because after the El Fashir, its image became a genocider. You see, its image right now became genocider, committing genocide. So RSF wants to improve its image all over the world. So they accept this truce, the ceasefire. But I don't think it will work because the other side, the Sudanese armed forces, they accept, they come to table with conditions. So they present some conditions, and they want RSF to leave the weapons, to leave the arms, and to withdraw from the regions they control right now. So these two conditions, I don't think RSF will accept these two conditions. And when you come to table with conditions unrealistic, unfortunately, that will not happen. That will not work because RSF is right now controlling one third of the Sudan. So they have some territory. So the SAF, the Sudanese armed forces, saying, "Okay, leave your weapons and get out of this territory." I don't think RSF accept this condition.
Yeah. So, in your personal opinion, like, do you think the geopolitical powers will actually allow peace to prevail in the region? Is it actually is peace in their interest? When you look at the situation from your point of view.
You see, we see a lot of external actors in Sudan, but these external actors not improving the situation. Unfortunately, they are making worse because they are following their self-interest in Sudan. So they move in the Sudanese arena with their self-interest. Some are looking the port, some are looking the natural resources like oil and gold. Some looking a place for agriculture. So the foreign actors, they have all motivated by the sources or by the opportunities. That's why they are not coming to Sudan as a peacemakers. They are seeking to increase their interest. They are trying to develop their own influence over the country. With this approach unfortunately makes things worse in Sudan and deepening the crisis, unfortunately. For example, the United Arab Emirates, it is a well-known actor, external actor, and involved in the crisis directly. So even the United Nations and other international media and international actors accept that our United Emirates is supporting the RSF logistically providing weapons and taking the gold, which they control in their region, in their territory. So there is a formula actually here, arms and the gold trade between the United Arab Emirates and the RSF. So without cutting this connection, unfortunately, you cannot stop the war in Sudan. And the role of the United Arab Emirates in Sudan is unfortunately making the crisis worse, as far as I see. So the same thing is actually relevant for other external actors as well. So they are approaching Sudan with for their advantage, for taking their advantage or taking for their share from the pie. So obviously they see Sudan as a pie, and they like to take a piece from this cake.
Okay, so it's not new that Sudan descended into chaos long time ago, probably years in the making. And during this time, of course, the global headlines had been mostly focused away from Sudan. Many people, Sudan has been ignored in the international media, even though from time to time the reports come out about the killings and atrocity that the RSF is committing in Sudan. But many are under the impression that it has been ignored until now. Has it been so? Why has it been so? That's what I want to know. Why is uh, Sudan ignored when it comes to global headlines? Is it because usually that's the case when we talk about African tragedies? where the African problems are not really given much attention in the world arena, or does it have any other underlying uh, reason for such type of ignorance?
Okay, brother Isaac, I tell you something on that. Uh, Sudan is ignored, or other African strategies is ignored. Yes, I feel also the same thing because the the global actor, the U.S. right now is carrying the only interest of Israel. And as you know, the Sudanese crisis and the crisis in Gaza overlapped. And in the same time period, we saw these two crises. So the world attention was on Gaza actually, because there was a real serious war in Gaza, and the U.S., as you know, main support of the Israeli interest in the Middle East and in other regions. So I think they gave the attention, especially international media, gave attention, more attention to this crisis in Gaza. So this overshadowed, I think, the Sudanese crisis or African tragedy, we can say. For example, there is a civil war in Congo going on actually for many years, and we hardly any hear about anything about this Congo crisis. So this is a fact actually. In the international media, tragedies found a place if this is related to some global powers, or if their interest actually affected in that crisis. So they are paying more attention. So I agree with you. The African tragedy and the Sudanese crisis ignored mainly. Yes.
Okay, so for the ordinary people in Sudan, how do they view the conflict? Do they see it as a conflict based on racial differences? Do they see it as an economic conflict for the resources like gold and others? Or is it just the geopolitical problems that Sudan happens to be experiencing due to its position in the Horn of Africa?
To answer this question, actually, we like to go a little bit back because the crisis actually started in 2018 because there was a regime change, as you know, in Sudan after a street protest. And in 2019, Omar al-Bashir regime ended in Sudan, and a new transition period started. And in this transition, unfortunately, dominated by the military powers of Sudan. Yes, the civilian actors, they were part of it, but unfortunately, they were weak because they had no power, like weapons. The armed forces and the rapid support forces, they, of course, have weapons and they have power, military power. So it was unfortunately not possible for the civilian actors to sit with the military actors in the same table and to share political power. So in that situation, we saw a political conflict between these three parties, and of course, the civilian part immediately uh, became the out of play. So because their power was very limited. And these two dominant power, the Sudanese army and the rapid support forces, started clashing each other in political matters. So these political matters later turned into a conflict, as you know. They turned into a conflict, as you know. So here we see a political situation transformed to an armed conflict. So this is the storyline of Sudanese crisis. So
But how do the people view it? Like, is
yes,
that the view of the
yeah,
ordinary people?
yes. Yes, I was just coming to that. When two parties started conflicting each other, of course, this was a very dangerous situation for the ordinary people because they immediately, all of a sudden, they found themselves, the Sudanese people found itself between two powers, squeezed or struck. Of course, the army is the legal part of Sudan state. So majority of people supported in that clashes supported the army because it is the legal organ of the Sudanese state. And RSF unfortunately lost the legitimacy after, especially after it committed crimes all over the Sudan. Right now, it has no legitimacy. It has no support from the people, ordinary people. So, as far as I see, right now, people support more the armed forces, but unfortunately, they are victim between these two powers. Powers clash. So, or usually, as you know, in the crisis, especially the armed conflicts, ordinary people pay price, and in Sudan also this is happening right now.
So, generally speaking, has the world failed Sudan? Can we conclude saying that the world has betrayed Sudan in some way or another? If so, then why have we betrayed Sudan? And can it be leveraged? Is there any way that we could leverage the situation and maybe uh, save as much people as we can from such a human tragedy that's currently unfolding in Sudan?
I'm not sure we can call it how we can call it. I'm not very sure, but the world is failed in Sudan. I can say that because even on the humanitarian case, we couldn't support enough humanitarian aid to Sudan in such a big crisis. So, in terms of the humanitarian support, yes, the world is failed. And in the peacemaking, in the peace building, of course, the United Nations is failed in Sudan. Right now, we don't see United Nations. They collapsed. Their system in Sudan is totally collapsed. And the external actors, unfortunately, we don't see them as positive uh, influencers. Unfortunately, their influence is in a negative way. So they are deepening the crisis. They are seeking their own interest, and they are making the situation worse in Sudan. So, in terms of the external actors, in terms of the United Nations, in terms of the international community and the civil society, we can say yes, the world is failed in Sudan, and unfortunately, we couldn't help the country. Right now, almost 2.5 years passed, and still there is no mechanism, unfortunately, in Sudan which can provide humanitarian aid or bring peace or support peace building in the country.
So one last question to make it clear. If if we assume there is enough humanitarian aid that is ready to go into Sudan, do we have clear ways of penetrating the conflict areas to provide these assistances, or is it just like the Gaza war, where it was not even possible to take these assistances to reach the afflicted areas? Is it a completely blockaded conflict that we're seeing now? Because you're involved in humanitarian work,
Yes.
what does it look like? Like, can actually help be delivered to the desperate people in Sudan?
Yes. Unfortunately, what can I say about this delivering the aid? Yes, there is a channel actually. You can send aid to Sudan. For example, the port of Port Sudan is open, so the ship vessels, the aid carrying vessels, they can reach Sudan. They can reach Port Sudan. From there, you can make some distributions in the areas affected by this conflict. But For example, if you tell me how we reach humanitarian aid to Darfur, for example, in Tawila, for example, right now, many people immigrated there from El Fasher after the RSF attacks the city. Right now, for example, reaching Tawila is very difficult, and providing humanitarian assistance in Tawila, because the numbers are huge, really. The United Nations Agency says, for example, 603,000 people arrived in Tawila in the couple of days. So every day, thousands of people they're coming to this region, and new IDP camps they establish in that region. So the need is really a big. So there are some challenges, but it is not safe, risky. But I know some organizations, for example, IHH, sometimes taking the big risks, taking the risk to reach the people in affected regions. But yeah, if you take the risk, you can reach them. But if you don't take the risk, you cannot reach. Uh, for example, right now, people in Sudan, in the affected areas, they need food because Al Fashir was under a siege, as you know, 18 months. So 18 months, aid blocked in Al Fashir. Right, people in the city were already suffering from the hunger. Right now, these people they immigrated to another place and became IDP. So this is the priority, I think, to reach those people who escaped from Al Fashir. And there are some organizations like IHH taking the risk and reaching these people. So if you like, you can do. You can reach them. Yes.
Yeah, Dr. Serhat Orakçı, thank you very much for participating in our podcast and sharing your perspectives
Thank you
on the
very
Sudan
much.
crisis.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. My sincere thanks to Dr. Serhat Orakçı for sharing his valuable insight into the conflict. What's happening in Sudan is not just politics, it's a human tragedy. Every statistic represents a life, a family, a dream interrupted. If you were moved by today's episode, please join us on our next episodes and please like and share the video. Thank you.